Welcome. I'm Indra Marpang. Thank you for joining us on a special interview with Mr. Reza Yamora Siregar, the head of IFD Progress. Now, Mr. Siregar, thank you for joining us on C today. Congratulations on the conference, successful conference. Now, let's go with the first questions. How do you, in your perspective, how do you see the global economy at the moment, and what the challenges, the headwinds that we're still facing at the moment?
Okay, I think if if we go back a couple years since 2020, we have came up from the first health pandemic in 100 years. The economy was just emerging, and we were actually expecting 2021 to be the beginning of recovery, 2022 pick up. But what we did not expect was in February 2022, we have invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So it was unexpected. It was unprecedented, and that leads into many of the situations that we have. We have economic sanctions, retaliations by the allies and the US on the Russian economy, and vice versa. And as you know, Russia and Ukraine are sources of key commodities globally, both food and energy commodities. So this is what we call the supply shocks. Okay, now these supply shocks are arriving from non-economic issues. So that resulted in what was then fear of stagflations. Stagflation is a situation where the economy is actually not doing well, or this growth is actually slowing down, accompanied by higher inflations. That's atypical. The last time it happens was 40 years ago, in the period of 1970s, late 70s, early 80s, OPEC 1 and OPEC 2, when we have a tension in Iran with the US, and that led to spike in the oil price. So stagflation is situations where usually when the economy is weakening, then price pressure is actually going down. When the demand is weak, price is going down. What we have nowadays, price shooting up in the US, in UK, in Europe. Inflation went up all the way to double digit, unprecedented in over 40 years. A typical US inflation is usually around 2-3%. Their inflation went up all the way to over 10%. Accompanied by concern of potential recessions in the US. So the economy is weakening, demand is weakening, but inflation picked up because the supply constraint. Product was not able to be delivered, and many of sanctions related to key products. For instance, in the case of Europe, Russia is the source of gas, one of the key commodity for European countries. So under this type of scenario, what we see, the economy of today, of global economy of today, is being affected by the stagflation, the high inflation, slower growth. But what concerning most is the geopolitical, because again, this is becoming a lot more political issues than economic issues. We are concerned about fragmentations. In the COVID period, we had a difficult period. We have weak economy, we have low inflations. But everyone was on the same boat. Every country in the world was in the same boat, and we were all fighting for the same thing. Dealing with COVID and trying to revive our economy. So there's consistency across policy around the world. Nowadays, we have vested interests, we have geopolitical tensions, we have fragmentations of policy, where, for instance, in the US, as I said before, inflation goes up to about 10%. Right now, it's still quite 4-5%. While in Indonesia, the inflation remains to be quite controlled. So during the COVID, we have the same process of policy. We have expansionary fiscal to support the economic growth, and we have expansion of monetary policy, also to support growth, and we don't fear about inflations. Yeah. Nowadays, that fragmentations of economic condition resulted on policy differentiation as well.
So
Yeah.
with that fragmentation and
Yeah.
the all inflation that's happening in Europe,
Yeah.
US, and other countries, how does it exactly going to affect Indonesia? What kind of challenges and how is it
Yeah.
going to affect us?
Well, it's the challenge is very straightforward. I mean, if let's say US increases the interest rate, just to give an example, and they did, they increased the policy rate over 500 basis point within the last 2 years since beginning of 2022. Yeah, if Indonesia did not follow, or has not followed, then what happened was, on likelihood, yeah, capital will move to country that give you higher return rate. Okay, when that happens, your rupiah will weaken. Yeah. Now, if we actually follow to protect our rupiah or to make sure that rupiah is not so much under pressure, that will penalize our economy, because an increase in the interest rate for domestic economy, that means higher costs of funding. Yeah. While at the same time, we don't really need to increase aggressively our policy rate because our inflation is not as high as in the US.
Now let's move to Indonesia. Again, as you mentioned before, Indonesia right now, the economy is progressively,
Yeah.
we're still stable.
That's right.
And then at the same time, we can see that inflation is not as bad,
Yeah.
as you mentioned earlier, it's not as bad
Yeah.
as the US or Europe at the
Yeah.
moment. However, if we see at the pension fund, and if you look at
Yeah.
the insurance and how much it contributes to the GDP overall,
Yeah.
it's relatively still
Yeah.
low. So
Yeah.
what do you think that,
Yeah.
what's the reason behind?
Well, I think those are unfortunately two different things. Yeah,
Okay.
one is basically so what we are saying, basically the economy actually has a fundamentally quite sound. Yeah, inflation is, price stability is here, growth is also very good. I mean, Indonesia grew by at least 5% in the first semester. IMF expecting Indonesia to grow by 5% this year, while the world economy is only 3%. So we're actually doing better. But when you talk about pension, insurance, those are two. It's almost like, okay, there's a market there, but why the market has not been the target of this strong economy? Yeah. So obviously there's a fundamental issue with our market. Literacy on pension and insurance are very, very low. If you look at the survey of OJK, yeah, literacy on the issue of insurance and pension is among the lowest. Indonesian being surveyed, actually, they have much better knowledge about the banking and the capital market, but not on the pension and the insurance. Unfortunately, on the industry-wise, reputation is not helping. Yeah, we have issue in our industry, both in the insurance and the pensions. And another thing, also based on the study that we did at IFD Progress, we also found that for pension and insurance, there has to be a minimum level of income for people to be able to consider buying insurance or pension. Yeah, is an extra luxury good.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to have a certain amount of income, excess income, excess saving, for me to be considering buying an insurance policy or pension fund. So that level of threshold is also has not met. But the main thing is basically, again, at this point we identify literacy as one of the key aspects.
I'm sorry, a little bit follow up on that one. So is there any country that we can try to imitate, or like as a sample that we can follow how they do their insurance or pension fund. Because I mean, if we look at to some countries like United States, they already require people to have insurance. So that's a whole different story. There's the law right there, but at the same time, they missing on some stuff like we have BPJS or something like that. So is there any country that we can look and then see like?
I think the biggest issue that has to be changed in Indonesia is the mindset. Okay, in many parts of the world, having an insurance is mandatory.
Right.
Yeah, if you don't have health insurance, going to hospital is impossible. It's very costly. If you don't have a car insurance, you cannot drive your car. Yeah. In many parts of the world, if you don't have health insurance, you cannot send your children to school, because the school will require you to have a
Proof of insurance.
Yeah, proof of insurance for your children. So that's mindset as well. People still think that insurance is a luxury good, not a necessity. Yeah, but if hopefully the lessons from COVID period shows us that cost of health is very, very expensive. Yeah, it's very detrimental, both for the country and also for the household. Yeah. So I think as we move into that, this is what I meant by literacy. This type of conference that we do, for instance, is actually highlighting those issues. This is our second international conference. We have 3 conferences already, 1 national conference this year. The goal is really to cultivate that literacy, that understanding, awareness of, when you think about insurance, when you think about what you do on day-to-day life, yeah, one of the biggest things that you have to do is actually to protect your spending. Yeah, it's not necessarily increasing your investment, but protect your spending. You don't want to have a unexpected rise in your spending because of incidents with your car, with your health, or something else. Yeah. So that's what we have in now. Of course, on the industry itself, we really have to strengthen our credibility, our human resource, our regulations. Yeah, that's part of the authority as well. So these are the things that we do at the same time at this point.
Right. Now there have been reforms in the finance sectors, and one of them in the industry by the P2SK, which is the consumer protection. But again, you mentioned earlier, there's some problematic companies including insurance. So what has been done, or what can be done to build or regain the consumers' trust towards the insurance company?
What I like about the Undang-Undang P2SK, it is probably the first time in a long time. I cannot remember the last time we have this comprehensive package. This is what we call the omnibus law on the financial reforms, where we're not focusing only on the bank. Yeah, we focus also on dana pensiun, pension fund, and we focus also on the insurance. Yeah, so we for the first time touch about that, and one of the sessions that we have in our conference is also the outcome of P2SK, which is basically the guarantee scheme policy for the insurance. We had the guarantee scheme for the banking system for many years, but we don't have for insurance. So with the P2SK now, we are going to have it in 5 years' time. We will be having our own guarantee scheme for the insurance. That's part of the consumer protections. Literacy is part of consumer protections. Yeah. So those are the things that I think is a positive for the insurance and also for the pension fund.
All right, so this is going to be my last questions. How do you see the growth of pension and insurance sectors, especially in Indonesia, and what's the potential for catching up with the Southeast Asia region?
Well, let me put it this way. The upside is huge. We have to have it. Can you imagine by 2040 we are going to be aging? Meaning, by definition of United Nations, a good percentage of Indonesian will be above the age of 60. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, BPS data indicated at least 20% of Indonesian will be above 60 years old. That means the cost of health will be expensive. Yeah, that means that there's a lot of retirement, a lot of people retiring. Yeah, which they will have to have a pension. Yeah, these are social issues. Yeah. So if I were to quote Pak Rosan, our Vice Minister for BUMN, yeah, he said that, and I agree with this, that financial inclusions, yeah, having as many people included and protected under this financial inclusion is a social issue, not an economic issue. Yeah. So insurance, pensions are social needs, not an economic luxury. So that's the chance that we have, and we have the next 20 years to solve that. Because if we are waiting too long, then we may probably the burden will be too high.
Now, how does IFG Life gonna take part on this?
Under the IFG, we have created IFD Progress. This is the first think tank that I know of, focusing on non-bank financial institutions. So we do research independent of IFGs. We are free to do whatever research identifying the problems of our sector, of our industry. Yeah. So can you imagine, IFG is spending money on me and my team to highlight the problems, to showcase the problems, to tell the people these are our problems. Yeah. It's not, I mean, if you think about it, maybe it's not even a good advertisement, right? But we have a different views on that. By telling the public, look, we know we are finding the problem, we are identifying the problems, and these are our problems, meeting that problems, yeah, and then of course solving the problems, because once we identify it, we are solving the problems, and explaining that to the publics. That's, to us, that's one of the way to enhance the credibility of our institutions. So we are at the front on that.
All right. Well, Mr. Siregar, thank you so much for sharing with us at C today. I hope I see you again, and we look forward for more solving the problems with IFG
Thank you
and the
very
whole industry right there. That was our conversation with the head of IFG Progress, Mr. Reza Siregar. I'm Indra Marpaung signing off. Thank you so much for watching.
Terima kasih, Pak.
Thank you.
Thank you.